You see Iran flying these drones into buildings. They flew it in the Fairmont in Dubai. Are you nuts? That's what they did. Apparently, they were using these in Ukraine. They had sold these kamikaze drones to Russia. One went down in a field. America had obtained it. Well, listen to this.
I want to go back to that breaking news just into CNN about Saudi Arabia. It says that it is prepared to...
Well, this isn't the right one. Hold on. I gotta find the right one because I find it to be absolutely fascinating. Here it is. So I'm even seeing that Iran is still rounding up people, even as all of this is going on. They're putting dissidents in prison as we speak. The killing is continuing. They're ramping that up. They're threatening their neighbors, which clearly is not a good idea. But the response, and this was the soundbite I was about to play you, the response has been tremendous from our allies. And this, again, is all set up by President Trump. This would never be happening, okay, if President Trump hadn't spent the first year recruiting these Middle East countries invest in America. And once you get their money, now they're tied to us, right? Trillions of dollars in investment, by the way. OPEC had agreed to increase oil, so we'll see what happens with oil prices today. But all of this looks pretty good.
I want to go back to that breaking news just into CNN about Saudi Arabia. It says that it is prepared to respond if Iran continues its retaliatory attacks. CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson joins us now. What have you learned?
So you hear what she said? Saudi Arabia will now get in the fight if it keeps attacking installations in Saudi Arabia. You ever think you'd see Saudi Arabia going to attack Iran? And Saudi Arabia said, hey, we weren't using any of our airspace for Israeli or U.S. jets to fly through to go attack Iran. Their airspace was cleared of that. And Iran still attacked them. So Saudi Arabia said, you know what, who gots to you?
Nick.
Yeah, this is a really new and big step by the Crown Prince here to authorize the possibility of Saudi response if Iran attacks Saudi Arabia again. He called their attacks yesterday and in the early hours of today cowardly. He said that these attacks by Iran were cowardly because Iran knew, the Crown Prince said, Iran knew that Saudi airspace was not being used to attack Iran, and this has incensed him. There have been attacks around the capital here that have been intercepted. There was an attack near a military airfield in the north of the country. There have been attacks further east, much closer to the Persian Gulf, much closer to Iran. They've been repelled so far, but the Crown Prince has said that because of Iran's actions, he is putting the country, Saudi Arabia's security first, the safety of its territory, the safety of its citizens, the safety of its residents. He's putting those things first. And for that reason, he says, he is authorizing the right and the military here to respond if they are attacked by Iran. And also we heard from the Foreign Ministry here on their Twitter feed last night that the Crown Prince had a telephone conversation with President Trump, and in that conversation the Crown Prince had full support from President Trump. This is how the Saudis were reporting it. Full support from President Trump for how they should respond. And this is yet another example of how Iran has turned these Gulf states here, these very powerful, militarily strong Gulf states, from being bystanders in Israel and the United States attacks on Iran into now potential participants. It ratchets up the fluidity of the situation here, the dynamic of what is happening. People here in Saudi Arabia are concerned about what happens next, but not as worried and not as under as much threat as some of the Gulf neighbors that are closer to Iran. And
because we haven't
so
even
think
heard,
about this. Oh, sorry about that. Hold on a second. That's my bad. So think about this. Iran has now managed to pull in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, quite possibly, Bahrain, all of these countries that normally would have been sitting idly by. Saudi Arabia now says we will not sit idly by as Iran launches attacks against its neighbors. And notice they're not blaming President Trump for this. There was a time you would have heard all these countries buzzing and spouting off about America and what are they doing, and they put us in harm's way. Not one of them has spoken out against President Trump. Because literally President Trump has set the entire game up in our favor. That is America first. This will not be an endless war. This will not be regime change. This is not going to be another Iraq. You're not going to see boots on the ground there. You're going to see a total dismantling of the nuclear program. You're going to see a total dismantling of the leadership in Iran. And then it's going to be left up to the Iranian people. And if the Iranian people lose and another rogue regime steps in, well, so be it. But the reality is their ability to do damage to their neighbors, to America, to Israel, to anybody else will be completely diminished. We're not going to go in there and help with regime change. President Trump's not going to do that. That was the promise to MAGA. The other promise to MAGA was that he would keep us safe. That's what this is all about, is keeping us safe.
Through the blood of our people. Car bombs in Beirut, rocket attacks on our ships, murders at our embassies, roadside bombs in Iraq and Afghanistan, funded and armed by Iranian Quds Force and IRGC killers. My generation of veterans carry the names of brothers who never came home. Brothers butchered by Iranian-backed roadside bombs and well-armed militias, thousands of our own. We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. Their war on Americans has become our retribution against their Ayatollah.
So, again, he just laid out the list of attacks. Now, do you think America can win? You think there's any shot America loses this battle? Not a freaking chance, man.
President Trump has also been very consistent. Crazy regimes like Iran, hell-bent on prophetic Islamist delusions, cannot have nuclear weapons. It's common sense. Many have said it, but it takes guts to actually enforce it, and our president has guts. Iran's stubborn and self-evident nuclear pursuits, their targeting of global shipping lanes, and their swelling arsenal of ballistic missiles and killer drones are no longer tolerable risks. Iran was building powerful missiles and drones to create a conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Let me say that again. A conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Our bases, our people, our allies, all in their crosshairs. Iran had a conventional gun to our head as they tried to lie their way to a nuclear bomb. It almost worked under Obama and his terrible deal, but not under this president. Turns out the regime who chanted death to America and death to Israel was gifted death from America and death from Israel. This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it.
Amen. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. Do you see the difference in attitudes that we have now from Joe Biden and President Trump? I mean, that difference is totally stark. But Lloyd Austin, who wants to talk and sound like a general in his deep voice, but then act like a complete wussbag pansy that wants maternity flight suits and transgender frontline soldiers. You can talk with the deepest voice you want. If you act like a wussbag pansy, I don't want you running our military. Then you got Pete Hegseth, fashionable guy, may not have the deepest voice as Lloyd Austin, may not sound like a general, but what he sounds like to me is a soldier who's willing to fight